Hello and welcome to today's episode of Authentic Achievements, where it's my absolute delight to be joined by the fabulous Saul Cohen. Saul, welcome.
Hi, Kim. Thanks for having me on.
Oh, I'm so looking forward to this conversation. But before we get started, let me share a little bit more about you with our audience. So Saul is an experienced accountant and acquisitions advisor, passionate about helping entrepreneurs achieve financial growth through strategic acquisitions and insightful financial planning. Having supported over 100 acquisitions, Saul brings a wealth of expertise in guiding business owners through complex transactions, with a background at firms including PwC and BT, and having worked with clients such as JP Morgan, EasyJet and Tesco. He offers insight across multiple industries and is particularly dedicated to assisting business owners who feel stuck, providing guidance on tax planning, exit strategies and acquisitions to ensure long-term financial success. Saul helps entrepreneurs shift from day-to-day operations to thinking like investors, maximizing both business value and personal wealth, and his unique perspective and creative approach to accounting making him a valuable resource for planning future growth while optimizing current operations. I mean, wow, what a wealth of experience and what a journey you've had already. Can you bring that to life a little bit more for us, please?
Yeah, go on. So look, I mean, I, I've always loved sort of entrepreneurship. I was really inspired by my dad was a solopreneur. He ran his own business. And so from quite a young age, I liked that sort of hustle, the get up and go, the creativity, that I suppose all the sexiness of
Yeah,
entrepreneurship, and I think I did economics at school and was really inspired by a fantastic economics teacher, and I came out, I suppose, because of those two perspectives. I went to uni, did economics, and my perspective on the world was always entrepreneurs are, the lifeblood of the economy. They are the people that make positive change happen, and politicians are the ones who sort of rein it all back, and they are the constraint on the economy, right? And they shouldn't be, and I know it's well meaning, but that's just my perspective. And towards the end of my time at uni, I got so frustrated. I was just like, I just want to be an entrepreneur. Right, these guys are amazing. Like, I just want to start my own business, and so I did. It was a small business. Did quite well, fantastic idea, and it was the sort of first lesson in the concept of, the idea isn't everything is in the execution.
yeah,
And I think I only actually got that lesson probably about 7 years afterwards, after we'd stopped, because there was someone who started at the same time. In fact, there were three people who started at the same time, but there was someone who started at the same time, doing exactly what we were doing, which was providing getting students to provide online tuition to other students or other people. And he sold out his business for 14 million,
wow,
and we sold for a number significantly less than that. But I mean, and that was a massive lesson, right? So he was an experienced, you know, business owner
yeah,
coming at this and sort of doing at his second round, go at the, bite of the cake, so to speak. And it it was a real good reminder for me, actually, that execution is everything. It's not just about having a good idea. And yeah, so then I went out. I became an accountant because I wanted to work with entrepreneurs,
yeah,
and I just thought, what's the best way to work with as many entrepreneurs as I can and advise them on their businesses. And I thought, yeah, you know what, accountancy would be quite cool. So I went to PwC, and loved what I did at PwC. It was an amazing place to work, and it was, and I feel very privileged that I was able to actually work at such a well-established company, because I think being there, you see lots of established companies, and not all of them run as well as you might think they do. And PwC was particularly then. I don't know what it's like now. I've not been there for a long time, but when I was there, it was a fantastic firm to be at, and it was really well run. And sure, everyone has their grievances, but it was incredibly well run. And then I, despite the fact that I loved what I was doing, I just felt that actually, if I think about what my purpose was, I remember I was on holiday and just thinking about what do I want to do with the rest of my career. And I was just like, I want to be working with individuals again.
Yeah.
This is a really cool. It's a really cool trajectory that I'm on, but I'm just not exposed enough to the entrepreneurs that I wanted to work with. So I toyed with the idea of going into venture capital. I didn't want private equity because I thought that was still too big. I wanted to, let's go work at the beginning. And then I thought, actually, do you know what? Why don't I just go work with SMEs? And so I did that as a consultant at first, and sort of morphed into sort of a M&A focused accountant. But really, that's what I do, and that's the I suppose the emotion behind all the experience that I've got is that I'm driven by this idea that um, you know my dad was a fantastic business owner. He sort of grew a fantastic lifestyle business, but was I, as his son, the accountant, looked at him and realized how much he was constrained by the fact that he just didn't get access to advice early on.
Yeah.
And if he would have had an advisor who would have been able to give him that advice over the course of 20 years, the value of that advice compounds, and the reward that you get for the hard work and entrepreneurship and and all of that effort, um, it's completely different to where you end up with, right? And so instead of having a comfortable life, you have an extraordinarily comfortable life. And I think, why shouldn't entrepreneurs have that? Why shouldn't they get the reward they deserve for the effort they put in? Particularly because, again, the reason why I love working with entrepreneurs is that in my experience, the most successful ones tend to be the ones who are the most giving, the
Yeah.
most generous, the ones who really want to give back. And I know, they don't necessarily have that reputation, but my experience is absolutely to the extent that they are giving and generous with, their time, money, every essence of their being. It's almost proportionately there's almost a proportional relationship between their generosity and the success they achieve. And so for me to be able to give back to those people, it's an incredible, that's what gets me out of bed every day, and why I love what I do so much.
Oh, I love that. Because I think once we find our passion, once we find that thing that drives us, then actually work doesn't become work anymore, does it? It becomes and that act of giving. And I think we're all here to serve. Sometimes we can't work out where we're supposed to serve. So we can have those stumbling blocks, can't we? I love that you had your own entrepreneurial journey and the lessons we learn. I often think that life only really makes sense in the rearview mirror. It's only when you look back and go, that's why I needed to learn that and that and that. And that's why it's going to gift me something that I can give back later on. Because I think very often, I work a lot with SMEs as well. And one of the first questions I ask is, what's your exit strategy? And so many of them don't have one. Like, but you're not immortal. So unless you have a strategy, your business will die when you do.
Yeah.
You've got to have that plan for it. So I love that one of the things that you're doing is helping people to take a more strategic long-term view of the business that they're building. So how do you get started with that?
We're taking the long-term view.
Yeah.
So actually not dissimilar to you, I always ask people what they're actually building. I think my father-in-law he ran a fantastic accountancy practice himself, and he sort of said to me, make sure that when you're giving people advice, you're helping them achieve what they want to achieve. Right.
Yeah.
And it sounds really simple, but often the sort of trap of the consultant is always that we might inadvertently be giving what we think is fantastic advice, or this is how you're going to make the most amount of money, but it actually doesn't help our client achieve what they want. What they want might be an exit, it might not be a huge amount of money, or it might just be financial stability. They might not want to put in the work to do to achieve £100 million exit, and that's okay. and your job as a consultant is to give them what they need. So my first step is always to find out what they want, and actually I think the skill in that is about being able to push the boundaries of what they say they want to understand what they really want, because sometimes what people say isn't what they mean, and what people think isn't necessarily how they, what they will prioritize. For example, the most common answer that I will get to the question is, well, when I say, what do you want? What are you trying to build? Most commonly, people will say, I want a really good income for the next few years, and I want a really large exit, of £100 million, right? And to me, it's not at all disrespectful to those people, because they are always successful entrepreneurs and absolutely capable of achieving that if that's what they really wanted. But my job is actually very rarely that's the case. They don't really want £100 million. What they want is financial flexibility and financial freedom. And they've just defined that as 100 million because that's a number that's big enough that gives them as much money as they can dream of spending. But if we actually were to break it down and say, well, look, this is the work that you'd need to put in to achieve that, and say, they often say, oh, well, I'm not sure I want to do that. So then it's like, okay, well, what do you really need? Okay, when you say 100 million, what is that? Is that a house? Is that 4 holidays a year and 5-star resort? What is that? Let's break this down. And maybe it's 300 grand a year or 500 grand a year. Whatever it is, fine. So, okay, well, how much do you need in assets to be able to spend 500 grand a year? Well, not actually that much. Yeah, 8 million will give you that, comfortably. With potentially some change if it's invested correctly. We just need to be able to extract it in a tax efficient way. You don't need 100 million. So what's 100 million for? And I think that when people have those, I think in terms of long term thinking, the first thing is for people to accept and appreciate what they really want, and the second thing is then to know what type of business they're building, and then plot out their journey, because there really are two types, and the decisions that you make on day one is very different for each type.
Yeah, I love that, because I think often, and it's not just in business but in life, when people ask us a question, the first response is the one we think is most likely to be acceptable, as opposed to necessarily the one that really comes from the heart, that like really drives us. And I think we have to get real to that, don't we? We have to get real to that part. It's going, is that really what I want? It's like, is that really my definition of success? And until we know what our own definition of success is, we're not going to achieve it, are we? Because we're off instead trying to create something that maybe we don't want. I know certainly for me in my entrepreneurial journey, success has looked different at different stages of my life. So right now, success looks like the balance of being able to spend lots of time with my little girl because she's only 8. And so I tailor everything around that. But once she's 18, that'll look very different. My plan then is different. And so I guess for me, one of the things that has really helped my business and my success, and I'd love your thoughts on it, is to have a really long-term view, but then to factor in the life moments and go, actually, right now, I don't want to exchange time for that, because right now the time with her is too precious and I can't get that back. But I do want to be building the stepping stones to make the changes, because there will be life changes coming, because that's how life works, doesn't it?
Yeah. I mean, look, to be honest, I love that you know that and you accept it, right? Because I think that something that I always see in potential clients is that they will always judge their success by the sales value that they get from their business, and I think that's a massive shame. And I think it's a shame for a few reasons. The first reason is that if you have a business that reaches £1 million in the UK, £1 million revenue, you're already in the top 1%, right? you're not in the top 1% of people in the UK. You're in the top 1% of business owners, right? It's incredibly rare to have a business that lasts, hits the 5 years, gets over the £1 million hump. You are a successful entrepreneur. If you get it above 5 million, I think it's like 0.1%. It's like the numbers are exponential in terms of reversely so
Yeah.
in terms of how many people, how big you get. And this is, again, it goes back to why I left PwC, because you very, very rarely see an owner managed business at the £100 million level. And
Yeah.
so the type of clients that I was based at, I never was exposed to an owner managed business. Never ever. There was one client that I had in the whole time that I was there that we saw that was like, it was this incredible family that they'd come to the UK from Cyprus and built a multi-billion pound property portfolio, and it was incredible. Yeah, it was an absolute pleasure to work for them. But they were like the exception, not the rule. They're
Yeah.
not. Yeah, right. And most owner managed businesses will never reach that level. And even when they do, they will often do it with taking outside funders, and the business changes and it takes different. It's really rare to have a family run business that hits hundreds of millions or multi-billion numbers. And yeah, I think it's a shame to define your success by those sort of stories that we hear that's might not be the life that you want.
Yeah.
And I think most people really want a lifestyle business which is different. And I'm more and more advising clients, look, if your lifestyle right now isn't conducive to you being able to go and build an asset for sale, and what you want is to be able to spend time with your family and live a balanced life, there's nothing wrong with building a lifestyle business.
Yeah.
There's nothing wrong with it. It just means that your investment, instead of investing in building better assets within your business, you want to build, use the profits from your business to build assets outside your business. That's
Yeah.
fine. And you're just making different investment decisions.
I love that, because it's about being intentional, isn't it? I think once we get really honest with ourselves, it's then about being intentional and being consistent, because that's kind of how we really do start to grow and develop that kind of like brand, the business, the awareness, and people buy in to people that they know, like, and trust, don't they? And so you've got to have that consistency. But one of the things that I see, and I'd love your thoughts on this, with some of the clients that I work with, is they've got amazing businesses and they've worked really hard at them, and they've great people working with them, and some of them, they're in the they've got past the 10 million, so they're in that small percentile, as you mentioned, but the business doesn't work without them in it. So they've suddenly become beholden to this asset that they're trying to build, because it only works with them in it. And it's helping them through that mindset shift of going, actually, we create you the governance and the infrastructure to have your business grow without you needing to be in it every minute of every day, and give you the confidence and the peace of mind that it is actually running and growing in the way that you would want to. And very often at that point, they're already feeling overwhelmed because they're too busy. So saying write down everything that's in your head doesn't help, does it? It's like, I haven't time to do that. Do you find that with the people you work with?
Yes, I mean, I do think it's really rare to be able to get to that size
Yeah.
without having that. I've the rare, yeah, I think most of the business owners that get to that sort of size have managed to start taking a step back. It's one of the reasons that multiples change,
Yeah.
the multiples go up as they increase, is that, there's an assumption that as businesses get bigger, they become less risky and less dependent on the owner.
Yeah.
But normally when it is the case, it's because the owner is incredibly special, right? They have a really, really strong IP. Am I? Yeah, right.
Yeah, that
Yeah,
absolutely makes sense.
and normally it's because they have they've just got a spin on things that no one else can do, and it's really hard for them to productize that.
Yeah.
And I think that there's no guarantee that you're ever able to do that, and you can have lifestyle businesses at all different sizes.
Yeah.
And the question to ask those sort of people is, do you really want an exit? Do you really need an exit? Or can we structure this in a way that gives you everything that you want, with just actually you starting to step back,
Yeah.
and see how, right? So you've got two ways. You can either carry on working the way you are and start investing outside and then just stop. But I think that's quite difficult. The other thing you can do is you can slowly, gradually start moving away. And it's why I think it's a really healthy, for business owners at all sizes to start. My business coach always suggests doing this. It's really good. It's like, have a time audit on sort of a semi-regular basis, and work out what jobs are you doing, sort of sub £15 an hour tasks, and get out of those boxes, unless you really want to be in them for a specific reason. Get out of those boxes. And I think that's a really good habit to get into, because it stops you. It's much more painful when you get to sort of 10 million and you're like, oh my gosh, I'm just holding onto the reins, and
Yeah.
you've got like maybe 12 direct reports, and they're all driving you mad, and you need to sort of consolidate, and that's really difficult. It's
Yeah.
much more difficult to
It,
do that than to do it gradually.
yeah, it's that, and that's so true. And I must admit, one of the things I use with clients is the do, delegate, and dump list.
Yeah.
So what are the things that you need to do, either because you want to, because they bring you joy, or because genuinely you're the only person that can do them?
Yeah.
What are the things that you can delegate, even if you can't delegate them today? They're things that you would be able to delegate if we found you the right person to delegate them to. And what are the things you can dump because they have no value to you, to your people, or to the business, or to the customers? I think if we do that regularly, and we encourage our people to do that regularly, then actually everything starts to become like much easier. And we start to be spending our time in the areas that excite us, that kind of make us want to get up and not feel like this is work. And I think sometimes when you are an entrepreneur and you kind of start off, don't you? You've got a great idea. And you're like, brilliant, this is going to be what we do. And then you get there on day one and you suddenly realize that your IT and your HR and your finance and all these other things that sit around the idea, that actually you're like, oh my goodness, I've got all of these going on. And so getting the right advice, as you shared at the start, getting early enough so that actually you might be four years in, but knowing it now is better than knowing in 20 years, so that you can start to make those changes and start to loosen the reins, or loosen where you focus on them. Because again, one of the things that I find is very often got great entrepreneurs, but they're not necessarily really comfortable doing the leadership part, having the really challenging conversations, or being able to set those decisions. So if you can acknowledge that and recognize that, then actually that's great. You can look to delegate some of that stuff out to somebody who you can bring in, who is going to be really good at that leadership piece, or who is going to be, one of the clients I was talking about, really, really big business, but didn't like numbers. So wouldn't look at them. And I was like, okay, well, we kind of need to look at the numbers because they're important, but we need to do it in a way where you feel confident, where it's not a moment in your week that you're going to dread. So how do we make them into a place where actually it's something you look forward to, not something you dread? And a lot of that is finding somebody you trust. And obviously, as an accountant, you are their trusted advisor. And that's where most business owners go, isn't it? To get their advice is to their accountant. And I guess particularly in what you do with mergers and acquisitions, they're such a big change, aren't they? What role do you see that mergers and acquisitions play in growing that business? And how can entrepreneurs identify if they're ready to pursue that path?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. So, I mean, I think the first thing is that mergers acquisition is a real niche.
Yeah,
It's a real niche form of accountancy, and you know, um, there's just so much into it. That's why we decided to specialize in that, and that's like sort of our bag, because you know I thought you can't do everything,
yeah, yeah,
but you can do anything, and that was the anything that we felt that we can do. Um, and in terms of the reason why I did it is because I think that it's really important for people. Actually, I started doing it for the exit because I thought it's really important for people to understand what the exit is and
yeah,
understand that, if they're not going to get the mad number, how can I get the best number that I can in the constraint that I've got, right? So I've got 2 years or I've got 6 months. What's the best number that I can get if I prep for the next 6 months or if I prep for the next 2 years or 5 years or whatever it is? Um, and that's actually how we started getting into that, and then we sort of it was we were attracting the buyers from the sale, which was interesting,
like it.
um, and the from a buyer's point of view, I think that you get lots of people buying businesses today, right? Because we've got a generational transfer of, baby boomers are looking to retire as they are across the economy. And in the entrepreneurial space, they're looking to do something with their business, and therefore the easiest thing for them to do is sell it.
Yeah, yeah,
Um, and that's why we're seeing such an uptick in the acquisitions market. But the ones that I see work most successfully, right? Because I buy into this in terms of anyone can buy a business. Yeah, it's not the actual process of making an acquisition is absolutely learnable and doable. The success of the acquisition doesn't come from, buying a business and completing on the purchase. The
yeah,
success comes sort of 12, 36 months later. Did we make that work?
yeah,
Um, and the ones that we see that are most successful are I've seen it be one of two types of people. Um, it's either a really successful entrepreneur who's maybe grown their own business, worked really hard, still has the energy to sort of, I've grown to £1 million revenue or more. I've built a team. I know what that looks like. I've got the energy. I want to make this work. If I made another acquisition, you know, um, let's say for example, we all right, let's look at, for example, a landscape management company, right? So doing really well, they've got really good contracts, but if I make an acquisition of another landscape management company who potentially has some contracts with local councils, that opens up a whole new
yeah,
opportunity for us, for example, right? And so those sort of strategic acquisitions, they work really well because it's people buying something familiar to themselves. They're not buying a small company that's going to be more of a liability than anything else. The biggest challenge there is sort of culture, but you know they've achieved a level of success. They know how to duck and dive. They know how to sort of swing with the punches and make it work. That works really well. The other type of acquisition that can work really well um, is sort of an experienced professional. um, I've seen it work really well with engineers. Those are right. So you've got an experienced engineer. They've run a team, maybe run a small department in a large corporate, and now they're looking and they're saying, "All right, well, do you know what? I've run basically a small team in a large corporate. I've owned my own P&L before. Let's see if I could do this as an entrepreneur." And for them to sort of go out and make an acquisition of a sort of small engineering firm, maybe making 2 million, or small, I'd say, 2 million pound. They do quite well as well because I've they know how to steady
yeah,
a ship, right? And I think it's that marker um, that signals to a business owner you are ready for an acquisition. I think the ones that struggle the most are, you know, they're people with little to no experience in entrepreneurship, or running a team or managing people, and then they're going out and saying, oh, I'm going to buy a business with, forget about revenue or income. I'm going to buy a team of 25 people, and I'm sure I'll be able to manage that, and that'll be fine. And it's
Yeah.
like, no, it doesn't really quite work like that. And that's where they go sour, and you see things like cash flow issues and whatever. But really, it comes down to, it's a mismanagement of team and a misunderstanding of understanding the economics of a business and all of that other fun stuff that you need to be able to do. And entrepreneurs will get intrinsically because they've been through it, but an inexperienced buyer will make those mistakes, and yeah.
Like that so resonates, because I think having led big teams as well as run my own business, people are messy. People are messy and full of emotion, and so they often will be the challenge. I see, and I say this to clients all the time, the problem shows up in the numbers, but I guarantee it manifests in the people.
Yep.
So down to misunderstanding, misinformation, or miscommunication. And if you can fix that, the rest becomes so much easier. So I can't believe where the time has gone. I've still got so many questions I could ask you, but I'm very conscious that we've overrun. But could I ask you, just before you go, could you share with the audience what you're most curious about right now?
I love this question. I am most curious about where the world is heading. I think that when I first started out, I remember being told, don't plan for 10 years. 10 years is too much. Plan for 5, right? You don't know where the world will be in 10 years, but plan for 5. And here I am 5 years later being like, no, you can't plan for 5 years. Plan for 2 or 3, right? And that sort of event horizon is getting shorter and shorter. We're living in a massively turbulent time, and I say that in a good way and a bad way. There's lots of changes happening, good and bad. Opportunities and risk in everything that's going on in the world, and I am incredibly curious to see where the world is going to be, what economies are going to look like in 5-10 years time. Because I think that the next 3 years are going to be incredible. And I would love to know what the world will be like in 20 years. Yeah.
Curiosity about the future is so key, isn't it? And I was at a conference recently where I learned that if we think just about the advancement in technology, in the last 10 years, in the last 2 years, we've advanced 10 years. And you're like, wow, and just imagine how that's going to keep growing. And lastly, before I let you go, can you share with the audience how they get in touch with you and who you help?
Yeah, absolutely. So I help successful entrepreneurs plan for their exits, whether that's a sale or an investment strategy, and help make sure that their exit is the exit they deserve, not the exit they are left with. We do that through acquisitions, both supporting with buy side and also with helping them prep for their own exits. You can get in touch with me on LinkedIn. It's probably the easiest way. Absolutely follow me on LinkedIn. I post quite a lot. And I'm also writing a book, so I can give you the wait list for that if you like. And that would be really cool. We're going to be dropping out sort of chapters and stuff for that as well. So just free test chapters and see what people think. That's probably the best way.
Fabulous. And for everybody listening and watching, all of the details of how to get in touch with Saul and how to get on that wait list will be in the show notes below. So if you were frantically scribbling and you didn't get it down in time, please don't worry, just look in the notes below. Saul, it's been an absolute delight. Thank you so very much for coming on and sharing your insight and advice with us.
Thank you so much for having me on. It's been great to chat.
Pleasure. And to everybody listening and watching, I hope you found today's episode to be as inspiring, insightful, and actionable as I have. And until next time, take care.